Hello. Today I wanted to show IPy widgets, which can be useful for creating very nice interactive articles, graphics, sub-selections in the Jupyter Notebook itself. Now, we can also use various advanced applications such as Streamlit, which are web-based interface. There are many such alternatives also. But today I wanted to show you how you can quickly, in 5 or 10 minutes, create some nice interactive widgets in the context of Jupyter Notebooks. I'll be using this library called IPy widgets. I just check the version as a routine activity. I am going to first show a student data set, which looks like this. So I have randomly picked up some 17, 18 names with their age, grade, and subjects. And I am going to show you how we can use df pandas df query syntax to select the students who have taken the math subject, and we can look at the grades. Now I can run this, I can change this math variable to something else and I can get a different subset. I can also do some different kinds of queries, like I can check the subjects where the grades are greater than 85. I can again modify this, see the number of students, do some kind of data understanding manipulation, or I can use the Jupyter Notebook plus the IPy widget interface, where let me first show you the app. This is currently showing all the students. I can now select the students who have taken the chemistry subject, who have taken the physics subject, and who have taken the math subject. You can see it's a fairly quick and easy user interface to do some data analysis as well as some sub selections. Now for this, I'm using something known as an interact decorator, where this interact is imported from the IPy widgets. And I have this subject as the list of all the subjects, which is physics, chemistry, and math, plus this all. So I'm creating this list. Now from this, given this list of these 4 possible set of subject selections, it is automatically creating this drop down for me. And once I select from the drop down, I am running this. So if the subject argument is picked up, and if the subject is all, it returns the entire data frame, which then gets visualized. If not, then if I choose one of the other subjects, then this query is run. Dave.query subject equal to, in this case, chemistry, and I've returned those set of the individual subject marks. Now, there are different kinds of arguments which we could have given, and this is there in the documentation of Jupyter Notebook widgets. For example, in this case, we were passing a list. So therefore, it automatically figured out that the dropdown is a best interface for exposing these different elements in the list. If this were a true false, we could have been given a checkbox, which we'll see in a minute below. If this were an integer range, we would be given an integer slider. If this were a floating point number and the floating point range, we would be given a floating slider. So there are similar such widgets, which we'll now use for the next app, where we want to filter the students by the subject and the min grade. Now you can notice that the function is fairly similar to the previous one. I've just added another argument, min grade, but now I've not added the interact decorator. If I run this function with the default set of arguments, which is all the subjects and min grade equal to 0, it returns me this entire data frame. Now, instead of adding the interact decorator, I can also call this interact as a function, where I'm passing in the function for which I want the interaction. I'm giving in the argument subject. I'm passing in the set of values which I want to interact over. And min grade is I'm giving as a range. In this case, it's floating point ranges going from 0.0 to 99.5 in steps of 5.0. So therefore, it gives me a floating point range selector. And you can see that as I'm varying the marks, it is showing me that subset of the students who have these marks. Similarly, we can also use this for plotting purposes, which is also very useful when we are trying to explore different kind of data sets. In this case, let's say I am plotting a simple sine and cosine function of a particular frequency. In this case, the default argument being 1. I'm setting the grid to true. And if I call this function with the default arguments, then this is the kind of plot that I'll get. Now I can again wrap or put the interact decorator, pass in the frequency ranges. I want from 1 to 5 in steps of 1. And you can see that I'm given this new interactive plot. As I vary the frequency, you can see it's in steps of 1 because that's what I'd mentioned. So therefore it's an integer slider. If I vary the frequency, you can see how the plot is going to vary. I can also modify this, make this a little more sophisticated, where I can choose the function type between sine and cosine, choose the frequency, choose the color of the plot, and whether to show the grid or not. So this is the more advanced version of Interact, where I'm giving in the specific widgets I want. For example, for the function type, I want a radius selector between sine and cosine. This is what a radius selector means. You will be able to select one of these. For the show grid, I wanted a checkbox. I'm specifically mentioning it as a checkbox. For color, I want a drop down. Yeah, I see a drop down between the different colors. And for frequency, I'm getting a float slider, which is going from 0.1 to 5 in steps of 1. So this is how we can also then call this interact function on the function which you want to be interacting with the different widgets corresponding to the different arguments: function type, frequency, color, and show grid. And now we can interact with this, with the different elements, and we can see how it's able to very quickly change, and we are able to explore the data fairly quickly. Now you can leverage this to different kinds of methods, as well as there are other ways using interactive, etc., which are there in the documentation. So this is the keyword argument which I mentioned a couple of minutes back. If we have true false like arguments, it automatically creates a checkbox. For strings, it creates a text widget. Similarly for lists, it creates a drop down. And then it also mentions other kinds of widgets and a lot of other very cool functionality, which I think would be useful.